Would TIG welding the whole thing be a crazy idea? Figure it would be good practice. Nice video.
Yeah, the cleaning would take a minute, def.
Hi Steven, thanks for the video idea, and hi Tyler, you're wrong, but thanks anyways I guess. So, he's talking about a diamond fire pit I welded up. I'll leave a link below for where I welded the whole thing up. This is just a lid, and I'll leave a link below for this too. But I TIG welded this entire thing that was sent to me from my buddy who sells these kits, and this one's 1/8 inch steel, and it's plasma cut, and all he does is just knock off the slag, and I was curious, so I welded the entire thing without prepping it at all. And you can see it turned out, it's not too bad for, just an unprepped TIG weld on a plasma cut edge. Restarts here, come down. All I did on this was I laid the rod in the groove and just torqued down on it like this to lay it flat and just mowed right over it at about 175 amps. No pulse or nothing. You get a few of these little spots here and there, but it's cleaner than MIG welding it. No spatter anywhere, no smoke. If you cared to make it super pretty though, you'd want to flap wheel back just a little bit and expose bare fresh steel where you were going to weld and clean it out good with a wire brush. But for what I'm using it for, I'm just using it for a burn pit. I don't care what it looks like. And on stuff like this, people always argue that MIG welding's faster, but in this scenario, I think that's kind of arguable. I'll do a test here in a second on some practice scrap pieces I have. Compare MIG time versus TIG time on this. But the main reason I TIG welded this instead of MIG welding it is because it's still cold outside. Winter hasn't quite broke yet. And my little shop, I'm working out of a semi-trailer. MIG welding this inside would have created a lot of smoke and spatter and more noise. And I didn't want to, turn on my big exhaust fan and get fresh air pumping from inside out. So TIG welding it, it was just a little bit quieter and cleaner. I like TIG welding better anyways. And where this is just a fire pit lid, I designed it to have my buddy make them to sell at the kits because I burn cardboard and stuff, and twigs and branches. And at the end of the night, if the wind picks up, you don't want embers in there, and I didn't want to have to keep dousing my fire with water, so I had peace of mind going to bed. So I just know I can put this lid on it and choke it off, and there's not going to be any embers blowing out in any fields. But like I said, I welded it at I think 175 amps, and you can see it's getting pretty good penetration. Something like this, you don't even need to burn halfway through, where it's just a simple lid. Okay, I'm gonna weld half of this with a TIG and then the other half with a MIG, and see, we'll try to time it out and see how quick it goes. Tack it together first. Tack it to the table so it doesn't move around. A little bit of a rough start. I wasn't pushing the rod in good enough. I wasn't dabbing on this. I'm just trying to go for speed, like constant feed, like a MIG wire would be. 30 thousandths wire on the MIG. A little bit excessive on the wire feed, slightly crowned up, but I could have gone a little faster if I would have turned the heat up and the wire down, but I don't know, might risk getting a little more spatter. So yeah, I don't know, TIG welding's really not that much slower, if any, in this scenario. Less smoke in the shop. You got to pay attention more to what you're doing with your amperage and your rod hand. It's, MIG welding's a little bit more mindless of a process. Kind of fun to MIG weld for a change, though. I hardly ever do it anymore. So if you try TIG welding without rod and you don't clean that mill scale off, that's what you'll get. So that was just laying the rod in there, not dabbing it. I prefer how the TIG looks versus the MIG, but take your pick. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna try 250 amps on this one. See how fast I can go. $325. Kind of starting to look like a MIG weld. Pulsar at 260 amps.